All right, welcome to Black Men Speak. I'm your co-host, J.R. Stewart.
And good evening, everyone. I am your co-host, Tommy Duncan. Welcome to Black Men Speak.
Big shout out to Liquid for providing our theme music. And if you haven't already, please like, subscribe, share the information about our show, and hit that notification button so you'll be notified every time a new episode is uploaded to YouTube. Um, our show is we do live every Wednesday, 9 p.m. Central Time. Please join us. And Tom, what is our phone number for those who want to call in and join the conversation?
Call in, folks, 972-497-2280. Again, 972-497-2280. Join us. We want to hear from you.
Yes. And tonight we're talking insurance. We have a couple of things that we hope to achieve. One, we have a brother on here, very talented, very smart brother who has his own insurance company, which I'm going to ask all of you out there to please go take a look, give him a call, email him, and at least do a policy comparison with him, and see if he can do something for you, either bring down your costs or maybe offer you more coverage than you currently have. And also, he's our industry expert who's going to talk more about how to get into the industry. My challenge is I'd like to see more people like Brandon Weber come up, and for you guys to come together and join forces. There's no reason why we can't become dominant players in this industry. So, with that being said, Tom, you want to get started with some general questions for Brandon? First of all, Brandon, go ahead and introduce
Yeah.
yourself.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and I appreciate the opportunity and thank you guys for having me on. I think that what you're doing is meaningful and impactful work. So thank you. My name is Brandon Weber, and I'm the owner of Alpha Performance Insurance. It's a full service insurance firm that specializes in making sure that people are educated and that we demystify insurance. By demystifying insurance, our process is simply this: we go through a three-step process where we first identify what you have, we identify where the gaps are, but most importantly, we find out where you want to go. Because insurance is one of those things where you don't need it until you actually need it. You don't know what it does until you actually need it. And you just pay for it because they say you have to have it. So what we're trying to do is make that process make sense, because what we found is that oftentimes people don't know what they have. They don't know the power of insurance, but it's oftentimes too late. And we're just on a mission. We're passionate about closing the wealth gap within communities that look like ours, and we're just on a mission to educate and inspire anyone that we come across, in whatever way that we can.
And see, Tom, this is the kind of businesses we need, man. People who are coming up who not only interested in generating wealth, but also want to close a wealth gap, like what Brandon just said. And Brandon, before I let Tom jump in there, please expand on full performance so people understand what services and products you offer, so they don't think it's just life or auto.
Yeah. So with the insurance, you figure the industry spends upwards of $8 billion for the state to tell you that a 15-minute conversation will change your life. That's not entirely true. So between the lizard, Flo, Chris Paul, and I'm a Lakers fan, so whatever with Chris Paul right now. So between all those things, it's about miseducation. So what my firm does is we are experts at auto, home, life, what's considered property and casualty. We also offer business insurance, business consultation. Now, business insurance also includes cybersecurity.
Mm,
How many times have you heard of ransom attacks
yes.
and data encryption and those things? So we do a full service review and also commercial insurance. So from small projects to large projects, whether you're renovating your home, you're buying a home, you have a vehicle, to, hey, I'm looking at purchasing a hotel and I need to understand my risk. We do overall risk analysis.
Brandon, you said something interesting: cybersecurity insurance. Man, my company is afraid to even take personal insurance. I mean, information. I just couldn't afford for it to be hacked and somebody's information to be out there, and we were the cause of it. I'd be out of business trying to provide coverage to everyone. So for that reason, all we need is your name and an email address. We don't want anything more than that because that's all we figure we can handle. But I'm glad you offered. Hey, Tom, I'm sorry. Go ahead and jump in because I know you had
Oh, no.
some questions where you wanted to get started.
Yeah, and I appreciate you kind of broadening the scope in terms of what you're doing. And I mean, and most of us, I mean, and kind of walk us through this because most of us, when we're young, we're growing up, we're kids, we don't really know anything better. We think of insurance as something that we have to have. Otherwise, we have to have liability insurance on our car. Obviously, we have to have some type of insurance on our house. I mean, for instance, if you're buying a house, you have to have certain type of coverage. If you have an apartment, you want to have renters insurance. But I'm gathering that you're looking at this from a different perspective. One, you talked about closing the wealth gap. I want to talk about that. I don't want to talk about that right now. But tell us in terms of within our community and the Black community in particular, what our approach is traditionally and how you can help demystify us having to have insurance as opposed to wanting to have insurance and why.
Yeah, no, and I think that's important. So we're talking about our community. When it comes to vehicles, get the cheapest insurance possible. Is a guy I need a company that I've heard of, So and oftentimes that's the biggest thing I think. Or I've been with this company, 30 years, and I don't want to change. There is a high level of reluctance, and that's perfect when you're properly covered. But what happens is I'm often finding that one, there was never a conversation about risk. It's about product. Forget the product. What's the risk? So more specifically, I often see as it relates to auto insurance, the lowest level of insurance. What that means is that you get into an accident, not only are you not protecting yourself properly, but oftentimes you're not even protecting others around there. And often I find that people are insuring other people more than they're insuring themselves.
Hmm.
And they are mad as I don't know what when they see that. There's a couple of coverages, nuances that, without getting too much in the weeds that, we don't have. I think from a home perspective, again, it's have I heard of the company, which is critical. But when I tell you there are companies that are higher rated and that specialize in insuring quote unquote the wealthy or high net worth individuals that you've may never heard of that offer things like full freeze happening in the Dallas Fort Worth area. Those companies that you may not have heard of, that there's a high level of skepticism, we're paying for people to go out of town,
Hmm.
paying all their expenses, paying all their food, paying all that. So maybe that's what Ted Cruz has. But when he decided to take his vacation. But in all seriousness, I think specifically, and I'm finding this, my family, my dad's side of the family is from South Louisiana, and I can tell you that the number of people that don't have flood insurance and a level that's high risk flood, the number of people that don't have proper insurance. So what's happening, and that I'm seeing more and more, that really it really bothers me to my core, is that an insurance loss is accelerating gentrification. Let me make that make sense. An area comes, there's a fire damaged home. What happens? That house is red tagged by the
Hmm.
city bulldoze. Who owns it? Now it's a piece of land that's up for auction or some other means of acquisition, and it's purchased that much cheaper. And think about where your grandmother stays. Why would you want to lose grandmother's house, grandfather's house, the house you grew up in, to an insurance related reason, where for $1,000 a year that could have been a problem that was easily solved. So,
Let me
and I
ask this
go ahead.
because
Yeah,
you
sure.
just brought up you just brought up a question that now are you from Louisiana or your family's from Louisiana?
I'm originally from California, so
Okay,
I'm a guy, California, Louisiana. My dad's side of
gotcha.
the family's from California. My mom's side of the family from, or vice versa. Mom's side of the family's from California. My dad's side of the family's from Louisiana.
I bring that up because, of course, we know that about a decade-ish ago, there's something that we call Rita and Katrina
Yes.
Hmm.
that ended up displacing a lot of folks in our community out of their home in New Orleans. And, for those of you who used to go to New Orleans and knew what the French Quarter, knew what a lot of those areas were that most of our folks were staying in now, and you look at it now, completely different
Hmm.
story. And in a lot of cases, a natural disaster, something like that happens, it displaces people for a period of time, but as opposed to being rebuilt for our communities, they were pretty much replaced. Help us understand about how something like that happens. Underinsured, uninsured, and you have whole communities that are never coming back Does insurance play a part in that? How does it play a part in that? How does it protect yourself? Because that was massive.
Mm-hmm. And it's still prevalent and it's still going on. So absolutely, insurance figures squarely in that, is at the center. So it's a two-pronged process. One is legislative. A lot of times the legislation, this is why it's so important for us to be engaged civically, because every year at the state level, they put on a docket what's going to be voted for. So for example, Louisiana specifically, they vetoed a plan that would have mitigated a lot of, the canal, the drainage issues that they experienced. And it was supported by the insurance commissioner, which is an elected official. The insurance commissioner for any state is the highest regulatory official for a commissioner. They say who's there, they say who's not there. Now, how it happens is simply this: mom, dad, grandma, auntie, Bobby and them, they have a policy. Their policy has a deductible. Their deductible is the amount that they pay or that they pay before the insurance kicks in.
Right.
Usually, what the companies will do, because it's not profitable to be in Louisiana, so to speak, they will raise the deductible to 5%. So let me give you a real life example. Aunt, retired teacher, meager means, you know, deductible if a storm happens is now $18,000.
Mm.
Okay.
Not only can they barely afford the premium, who can afford readily an $18,000 premium, considering the fact that the statistics say that most Americans are a $5,000 emergency away from bankruptcy.
Yes.
So you couple that with, an economically kind of, distressed area and an $18,000 premium. That's one. Second, they have contractors, scammers. They prey on these areas. They wait, they sit, they chase the storm, they come in, they start the work, and they never show up. And because of the culture of Louisiana in particular, it's I'll take your word for it. Come on in, have some food, or you are adopted family, because we're going to be that accepting, because usually the intentions are really reflective of how they feel. That being said, it's nothing for a contractor to say, hey, if they're able to pay the insurance, go ahead and give me the $100,000 check that the insurance company wrote out.
Mm.
They'll start for a week and they're gone. So
Wow.
now you've just exacerbated the issue. And then someone comes along, a bank, a financier, an investor, and says, hey, I have $18,000 for your deductible. Just sign over the rights to the home.
Mm.
And for little to nothing,
They get the
they're
property.
acquiring this property. Now, and then the cities, what they'll do is, as I mentioned, they'll ragtag these properties, knowing that there's no means to afford to get back in. So it's, it's an effort, and it all can be really mitigated by just a few couple conversations. One, check your deductible every year. Every year, review your policy. Two, even if you're not in the flood prone area, all these 100-year storms that keep happening every 2 or 3 years, I think we have to do away with the term 100-year storms,
Yep.
because the climate has changed.
Well, I have
That
a,
being said, there's simple means.
okay. I have a question for you, Brandon.
Shoot.
So during Katrina, you heard about people saying, well, I had a policy that covered the hurricane, but they came out and said my house was damaged because of the flood, not the hurricane. Or if I had flood insurance, it wasn't the water that tore my house down; it was the winds from the hurricane. So it's like you never know which one to get to protect yourself. And on top of that, where are the agents who sold these people these policies when these kind of things are happening to say, hey, be cautious against dealing with contractors without a reputation that just drove in yesterday. You don't know who they are, and then ask you to sign checks over. And who's there to make sure that people have the right coverage for the area that they live in? You may need both policies, or maybe you need one or the other, or maybe it's just a scam on the insurance companies. Can you talk more about that?
Sure. So I think the process is flawed. You asked some really good questions. So specifically as it relates to Katrina, and then recently Delta, Laura, the smattering of hurricanes that happened this past hurricane season, the agents are not there. They're backed by these billion-dollar companies, and their language is so tightly written, so they have out clauses. So they're not a part of the process as it comes to the claims. Most agents. That's why when you work with an independent agent or firm, you get that high level of touch service where you have somebody with you through that claims process. How it happens, or I think you also kind of asked me about, which coverage is the proper coverage.
Right. Some people may
Think
not
of it like
have
this.
it.
Absolutely. The cause of loss is the cause of loss. They're two separate policies, no matter if you're in Texas, Louisiana, California, what have you. Flood policy is run by the government. It's FEMA. Your taxpayer money is paying for it anyway. So that's separate. Your home policy, your hazard policy would be from like a State Farm, a Safeco, Liberty Mutual, what have you. The cause of loss is what's going to determine who pays. And each of them are trying to get out of paying.
Right.
That's how they stay profitable. So if I'm just lay it out there just as plainly. So really it comes down to, you want to have both. And you don't want to, and if you're not in the flood zone, good. It's not going to cost you anything more than $400. And it doesn't matter where you get it from. Any company will have the same amount of coverage because as it relates to flood, because it comes from the federal government. Now, as it relates to your homeowner's insurance, that's going to fluctuate. The age of the home, the age of your roof, a number of different factors are going to fluctuate. And if you're in a state like Texas, they use credit as a rating tool. Michigan will use credit as a rating tool. California will not. So when you think about insurance and you kind of zoom out, think about it from an industry perspective, lower credit, it costs money to be poor.
Yes.
You're going to pay higher insurance based upon credit score in like 38 states. So and then you start to compound these things.
Back up. You just said something that just, so it costs more to be poor.
It costs more
Break
to be
that
poor.
down.
Okay. So when you think about this, you think about all the systemic ways that we as a community are, from redlining. And my grandfather would show me maps in California, a red line. I'm originally from Compton, California. And he showed me a map. The city drew a red line, no black people above this line. So then you start to think about those concerted efforts. Then you start to think about the wealth gap, what I talked about. A lower credit score, you're going to pay 3 to 4 times as much for your insurance. That's auto, that's home, even life insurance. A lot of people don't know that. That is a rating factor. That is a risk factor. Now, will every company say that? No. And this is something that I want to also talk about too. As it relates to where we are economically, and then you start to think about the deductible, paying more for your insurance, not knowing about insurance, all that has a cost to it. And now that home that you've grown up in, that you've loved, that you have all those memories you're trying to protect, you're one weather event from losing a cornerstone of our wealth. Oh, and remember 2008 when values start to go down and we as a community lost 1.2 trillion
Yes,
dollars in
from
wealth
home foreclosures.
between
Yes.
'08 and 2010.
The
So
Obama
and that's one
years.
thing. Yeah. And that's one thing to also consider too. A lot of times I work with a wide variety of people. But one of the things that I think is not talked about enough is underwriters and the role they play in this. An underwriter's role is to evaluate risk. But let's say, for example, there is rife with bias. And that's something as an industry we've been trying to fight. Meaning that if I have 2 pieces of paper and I have a name that's quote unquote ethnic and one that's not, and my background doesn't support me having knowledge of the ethnic name, oftentimes if it's in the hands, it's subjective and it's subject to someone else's bias. So again, zooming out, I would love to see more of us in the industry because now we have different levels of advocacy throughout the insurance chain.
So you tell me that we are considering our demographics in this country, that even in the insurance business, because I mean, I always thought of insurance as one of those areas where there's a little bit more parity in terms of Black folk, let me be clear, being in the industry. Are you saying that based on what you're seeing that we are still somewhat underrepresented in the insurance industry? And in what areas,
Grossly.
if that is the case?
Grossly throughout the entire ecosystem. If you recall, there was a push by T.I., rapper T.I., in order for Lloyd's of London. The cornerstone of the insurance industry was the transatlantic slave trade.
Yes,
They
that's
would
true.
insure the boats and their
And the
cargo. So
slaves.
a
That's
company
right.
like that's it. So you think about a company like New York Life and this is all public knowledge. They have an effort where they wanted to recommit $50 billion back into the black community. That's because they were principal, along with Lloyd's of London, in starting their business, creating these generational wealth patterns based upon cargo or property. As it relates to the industry now, I think that's been prevalent. So when you think about one of the industries where there's low barrier to entry, a lot of, it's financially feasible to get in and be successful and have immediate success. We're not there. We're not at the on the carrier side that like the companies of State Farm. We're not at the BB levels. We're not in the sales levels represented enough. We're not at the underwriting level. On the independent side, we're not any. We're I want to say like 2% of the industry as a whole. And when you think
Wow.
about the industry as a whole, I mean, you're talking about an $80 billion industry where we're underrepresented. And here's something I'd like to see, and this is something that I've made a concerted effort. And Tommy, just kind of in recess in my mind, I know you're really a part or a proponent of organizations, whether it be like National Sales Network or those types of organizations that bring
Right.
together professional organizations. There's one like that in the insurance industry, and it's National Association of African American Insurance Agents.
Okay.
Mhm.
That organization, those professional organizations, that's what they do. But I can tell you this, and I know this firsthand. I've talked with the large firms, I've talked with the small firms. All of the larger firms that are primarily majority owned, and we'll put majority in air quotes, that are white owned, are now figuring out ways that they can become minority firms. Let me say that again.
Mhm.
All of these companies, large conglomerate, 100, 2, $300 million companies, are now figuring out ways that they can become a minority owned firm because they see the value that we are missing.
Hmm. Is that about putting in a
Mhm.
wife's name, finding a proxy to put the company under and then the person's name to make it look like a minority firm?
Well, those who do that will be sniffed out. You ever seen the movie The Banker?
No.
Yeah.
With yeah,
Yeah.
so so it's a lot of that going on, and yes, so to answer your question, Jimmy, yes, and yes, there will be some of that, and there will be some firms that have an earnest belief and have the heart to serve and see that they can make an impact in that space, but there will be a lot more that will not. Just recently, Russell Westbrook and Russell Wilson and Sierra,
Hmm.
they partnered up with an insurance firm. um, well, when you read the details, it doesn't sound like much more than what we're talking about, and that's not
Mm.
nothing against them. But on the surface, I think that we're in a great space where if we just kind of galvanize and utilize our resources, we can not only fund our own communities, but we can protect our own communities.
Well, let me ask you this, Brandon. If a person wanted to get into the industry, what's the best way? Do you go to work for one of the big firms, entry level, or do you go out and get a license? Do you become an independent contractor? I mean, what's the best way to get started here? Or what are
Yeah,
some ways to get
a con-
started?
Absolutely. Well, contrary to belief, one commercial won't, knight someone to be an insurance agent. There is a licensing process for every state. There is a licensing process, and that licensing process consists of training, hours of coursework, and then a test. Upon passing the test, you are licensed to, either sell or some capacity in the industry. So, for me, I would recommend starting with a big firm, and
Okay.
here's why: you essentially get training on someone else's dime, you get licensed on someone else's dime, but you learn the business part of it and become a sponge. And then if the independent channel is something that you're more, you have a proclivity to kind of lean towards, then absolutely you can do that. But you have a level of experience where you've learned, you've been seasoned, and you can go out, you know enough about the industry as opposed to going out there being completely independent and starting from scratch. That's the path I'm most familiar with. The
Okay.
other thing I would say is look for professional associations, and look for those who are in the industry. an intern. Start there. Just get an interest, because I can guarantee you this: there are not many people in the world that wake up and say, you know what, I want to be an insurance agent. It is probably the least sexy, least attractive, position in sales and risk analysis, analytics. Well, when I'm talking to young people and I'm saying you're good at math, great, I love that. Did you know that actuaries average $700,000 a year?
Wow.
Whoa, I have their
Yeah,
attention.
the attention then,
So they're
yes.
anywhere between three and 700,000. Well, wait a minute. I like math. I like predictive analytics. You being able to predict what type of storm season we have, bake that into the risk, you now put yourself in the top 1% of earners in the world, and you would have never
Yeah.
thought about it.
Right.
So I think that one, it's an industry obligation to tell the industry story a little bit more than what the major companies will do, and the billions that they spend in advertising. But for somebody who wants to get started, I would say, first identifying somebody in that industry that looks like you. Second, looking at a larger firm to get comfortable understanding what it is, and being able to navigate multiple roles. And then once you learn and you kind of see it, do what I did. I started counting the money. I said, well, wait a minute. This is the kind of operation that I'm bringing to this large corporation, and that it's a phenomenal company. But what could I do on my own?
Right.
And I think that that level of training just helped me with some
What about
level of
what about
success.
the offers? Like for instance, I used to get offers from State Farm to open up an office. Like you didn't have to have any experience. They bring you in, they give you some money to get you started, and I still get them from what's the other company? Farmers from time to time.
Hmm.
They do a lot of that. Hey, start your own insurance office with farmers, and uh, speak to those deals. Are those legit? I mean, what is there has to be some caveat. They're not just gonna come in and give you a bunch of money to open an office up. Surely, I mean, there has to be some risk to you, the individual. So they can't just take all of it, can they?
Well, I think those offers, and this is, here's my disclaimer: this is nothing specific to any of the companies mentioned. Industry overall. A lot of times, what you'll find with those opportunities, there are cloaked finance opportunities, meaning that they will finance you, they will train you, and you will learn a lot. But the question is, do you own your business? Do you own your clients? And the money that they fronted, because the entry cost could be 40,000. You may have to have a storefront. You may have to
Right.
be responsible for staff and payroll. That comes usually in the form of a loan,
Okay.
and it's a loan to the
Yeah.
company. And with a loan, there's typically interest,
Right.
and there's no ownership until that's paid back.
So there's no free
So
ride,
there's some.
basically.
Absolutely not.
Okay. Okay.
Absolutely not.
So you need to be careful,
That's
make
the
sure
and
that you can generate the revenue needed to pay this loan back before you jump into one of those deals. So it
Right.
may behoove you to have some industry experience and background, like you said, before you take one of those deals. Don't just go in green, not knowing anything, and try to make that work. I got one more question, then I'm gonna. I know Tom got something, and I'm sorry I've been hogging all the questions.
That's okay.
Sales, sales. I mean, one of
Mhm.
my, big thing is I meet a lot of small business owners and some people who want to go into business who have no knowledge whatsoever, no inclination on how to sell their product or their service. And I know that sales is the lifeline of your business. And if you can't get out there and sell something, I'm not sure you're going to bring the revenue in. So when you get these SBA loans, you have enough money to live for a couple of years with no sales. How important is sales to your industry, to your business?
And I think any sales professional listening to this can appreciate that. When you look at that income statement, what's that top line? And that's how vital it is in any industry, but especially the insurance industry. Because the name of the game, and I look at it from a perspective of this: if I'm not helping anyone, not only am I'm not making money, but I'm not creating opportunities for somebody else to help someone else. So the sales aspect is important. But I think any good sales professional, you have to know what you're talking about. You have to have a level of expertise, because you're selling nothing more than a promise and a piece of paper. And that's it. It is the most nebulous transaction probably that we have, throughout anything that we do. Hey, here's a piece of paper. Here's what it says it's going to do. You pay me a lot of money. Oh, by the way, you have to have it.
Right.
There's not many things like that. So I
Right.
think that the sales part of it is I'd say paramount, is critical. It is, the number one aspect. And then from that standpoint, it's all about what systems are you building in order to be successful. Because I had to learn the hard way that one man can't do it alone. And the more that we're starting to think systemically and think about process, I think the more we'll increase sales capacity, no matter what profession.
Right.
We are what we do. We are our habits, and that repetition. Those practice, those jump shots. Ultimately lead to a level of expertise.
You mentioned something a little bit earlier about closing the wealth gap. What role does insurance play in that concept?
Yeah. So I think of all the things that different products that we offer, I think one that's near and dear to my heart is life insurance. And here's why. One of the ways that the Kennedys, the Shrivers, the Rockefellers, you name all the legacy families, one of the ways that they become those legacy families is through life insurance. So that is, and this is, I hear this. So we kind of tying it back to our first question. Community wise, sometimes you get the adage, well, I didn't start with anything. I don't want to leave anything to my
I know.
kids. They're gonna have to work.
Every
And
generation
I'm
starting
like,
from scratch. Stupid.
that's it. And when I hear that, I understand it. And the first thing I do is I don't react to it in the back of my mind. I'm like, it's a cold world. But closing that wealth gap, it starts with exactly that, leaving an inheritance.
Yes,
And one
true.
of the most cost effective ways to leave an inheritance is through life insurance. Because I always say this, I have a phone, a smartphone, like most people, and I have insurance on that phone. This phone will not be here in 20 years.
Right.
I can't leave this phone to my family because there will be a newer and greater model. But what I find is that there's a case around the phone, there's the screen protector, people
Hmm.
wipe it, they don't go anywhere without it. But when it comes to the conversation about life insurance, then it's like, well, what's that? So we're not ignorant of the concept, but I think that is the hallmark of creating generational wealth. And just kind of for those who don't know what it is a tax-free vehicle in your passing that you leave to your family.
It's interesting. I remember, I forgot where I heard this, but someone made this statement, and it's been some months ago. They said, relative to the value of it, we in our community, some people have more protection on their phones than they do on their life.
Mm.
Hmm.
It kind of took me aback, but all I can say was, wow. They
Absolutely.
invest more into protecting their phone that they're going to be replacing sometime pretty soon than they do on their own life.
And that is what I see. And then, just quite personally, in 2005, I lost my mom to battle to cancer.
Mm.
And it
Sorry to
was
hear
a
that.
guy. I'll never forget. I appreciate that. It was a gentleman. His name was Henry Tompkins. They went to high school together, and he came by and he had a conversation with us. And this was diagnosis and everything. He said, "You need to get life insurance." And we weren't even thinking in that vein. And lo and behold, 2 years later, ultimately she transitions, and now at the age of 24, I'm able to at least navigate and set my family up differently than I would have been able to had that not been there. Now, was it, enough for me to retire? No, no, not by any means. But was it enough in the process of dealing with the loss and trying to go through, that process of transition and figuring out what's needed and where about the home and things like that? Did it add a level of peace of mind? Absolutely. So I'd say had that not happened, then my start would have been different. And then therefore, there would have been a series of things that would have changed the course of my life, which ultimately would affect my kids. So going back to your question, it really, really starts with planning and responsibility. But a simple vehicle to do that is life insurance.
Okay.
And you bring up something that obviously we all have to deal with at some point in time. And in a lot of cases, I think in too many cases, a lot of us, or maybe our parents, do not really want to deal with the conversation about the ultimate demise of every person that was ever born, and that is
Hmm.
death. And one of the most unfortunate things that I think I hear most people talk about is what happens when someone passes. Everything from we need to take a family collection so we can pay for this funeral
I
and
know
all this
that's
kind of.
sad.
So
A
so
collection
talk
to
to.
pay for a
There you
funeral.
go. Talk to us. I mean, I know I've had this conversation so many different times with folks who have a parent, does not have a will, does not have
Hmm.
anything in place in terms of what happens, when they transition. But to the point that everybody, I don't know that I know of anyone who's been able to cheat death yet. What is it that you can tell our audience about what they need to do and the risk and the potential family friction and trauma by being underprotected when eventually it's going to happen? Somebody does pass, and especially like a parent, whether that's your mother, father, grandparent, or whatever that happens to be.
Yeah, now as they say, now you're on my street. So I always the way that I have these conversations is, obviously your name is not Jesus and your name is not Lazarus, and those are the only two people I've ever heard of coming back. So so ultimately, I think you hit on something key. The conversation needs to be had. So Aretha Franklin didn't have a will
What?
because we don't want to deal. She did not have a will,
Ouch.
and it's
Wow.
strife and turmoil that happens more often than not. But I think so. To your point, I think we need to think of ourselves as our own business entities. And a lot of times we're demystifying this. A lot of times people think, hey, I have to make $1 million a year in order to have a team. No, you don't. You need to have a team. You need to have an insurance professional, tax professional, a financial professional. That could be somebody who's astute in your family, but there needs to be some level of core, communication. The second thing I mentioned was communication that needs to happen within our families. Whether it's some sort of secure means in order to keep the documents. I can't tell you. Not only does the conversation not happen, but when it ultimately an unexpected death does happen, having someone find important documents
All right.
can be the difference between having a level of stress that you can handle and having a level of stress that you may not be able to, compounded with the loss. So, if I'm asking those that are watching, do you know where your life insurance are? Your spouse's life insurance, your parents' life insurance? Do you know where their will is? Do they have a will? Those questions that we have to start asking, especially because we're in a time now. I read this, I was reading a stat, an article that said that, in the next 5 years, the average population age will be 60,
Mm.
Mm.
which means that not only, and this is a conversation I had with the ophthalmologist. I said, man, you're in a great business because vision is going to be a part of that. But outside of that, you think about that. We're going to have grandparents, parents, and children still alive. And
Still
nobody
alive.
wants to have the conversation about their child preceding them in death. That's not what don't even enter that into your mind. But what if you can set them up to not have the conversation that you have to have with your parents? Think of it that way. Let's think of it as being proactive. So, I mean, I've seen everything from knockdown, drag out fights to utter chaos, or the one person that's quote unquote the strong person in the family having to shoulder the load and
Yeah.
sift through a person's life where that can be avoided. So yeah, that's something that happens more. And what about those that don't like fried fish?
All
I'm
right.
not going to a fish fry. I don't really like fried fish. I'm kidding, but I'm just saying that I think there's a better way besides fundraisers. GoFundMe should not have any space
Yeah, for a
in
funeral and
the
for. Hey, does being a black-owned business owner, I mean, is that a hindrance to you selling your service and products in the black community? Do people look at you and say, yeah, kind of, maybe I'll call you later, but really deep down, what they're really saying is that I much rather buy insurance from a white person. That's who I trust.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think what is it? Leonard McKelvin, aka Charlemagne the Guy, wrote a book called Black Privilege, and I'm of that mindset and thought. I don't think that the hindrance so much is race or competency. I think it is access and knowledge. Meaning, so we think about this. I don't think about it in terms of black and white. So yes, there are some people that will never do business with me because I'm black. Good, appreciate it, thank you. Because you're cheating your family because of your own bias.
All
That's
right,
not my issue. That's not my problem. So absolutely, I think that there are just some people that will not do business with a black person.
and that's sad.
Fine. It is sad. But I think that from an economic standpoint, I like I think we are in a stage where our wealth is emerging to where if you look at the population where the trends are going 2043, I think the nation will be a nation of majority minority. Right now, the birth rate among Caucasians is a negative birth rate. You look at what the Vatican is saying and a number of different things. I think they're keenly aware of that. So eventually, you're not going to have a choice.
All
So the
right,
question really becomes is how much do you love your family? Do you love what you're tied to, your construct, your racial construct, more than you love your family? Fine. Well, when you pass on, I hope they can eat that. I hope they can live with that. So to answer your question directly, yes, it is something that we all face as black professionals. Absolutely. I'm of the mindset of I want to work with those who want to work with me. So it's really not I don't care.
and we need to all
If
come
I can be
together and
frank.
work together. I mean, we
Yeah.
should try to organize a Black Business Summit where business owners come together and not, you only do business with the people who are behind me, so me and my little clique can make money. No, we need to all work together and agree to do business with each other. You sell insurance, all different kinds of insurance. All the black businesses that we can bring together should all be focusing on trying to do business with you and other black insurance agents, and vice versa. If we don't spend money with each other, we're never going to catch up. And I'm really doubtful, and I hope I'm wrong. I hope I'm proven wrong before I die that we'll ever have a chance to catch up. But it looks like we are our own worst enemy because we don't do the things that we know. Not like we don't know this. We know what we're supposed to do, and we just don't do it. So if we can come together and take that $1.6 trillion that God gives us every year to free ourselves, we can do this.
Yeah. No, I think that you're hitting on a key point. I think from a business perspective, I think we're thought or taught of the mindset of, and this is no fault of our own. And again, this is just these are anecdotes, but we're taught, or we think in terms of smaller increments, smaller denominations. So we may have 10,000, 100,000, 200,000, $1 million dreams. Or if we just raise our increments, I think we'll be in a better space. But we also think acquisition and not we more think about getting bought out or exit strategy and not merging and acquiring. And I think to your point, that may be an opportunity where a slight shift in mindset, if we say, okay, I'm a small insurance firm, you're a small insurance firm, you're a small insurance firm. Combined, we're a medium-sized insurance firm.
Right.
Now, what government contracts, what are we able to do as a medium insurance firm? And then maybe we pull in and partner with a larger. So I think to your point, if I may, I'd push back. I think it's sometimes knowing is one thing, but having access is another. And I think the more that we have access to not only the information, but also the blueprint, because if we knew and we had, the resources, but there's no kind of plan, the last thing we're going to do is, you know, what money we have is put it at risk. So, and I
Right.
agree with you, but I think I'd like to add to that. I think that knowing is one thing is key, but I think access is another. Access to the blueprint, access to the roadmap, and then that mindset shift of we're better together, but we have to be able to trust and we have to have sound business practices. Because you guys as professionals,
I know.
that you can be the most talented person in the world, but man, if I got to email you a million times to get an answer,
Yeah.
We're not fit to be partners because you know there's a level of excellence that each of you demand of yourselves that you would want your customer or anybody that your client to experience. So I think that's also a barrier more so than anything. We just got to get our stuff together.
So very true. Tom, with a little time, we went a little over, but it's okay. Um,
So,
any other questions for Mr. Brandon?
Well, I think if I were to have a closing question, and you actually made some very good points, and Jimmy, you and I have talked about this as well when we talked about what other cultures are doing to grow their collective pie. I think, part of your point is some folk think that, okay, I get through the door, I want to get everything, or I want to close the door behind me so I can get as much as I
mm-hmm.
can, and they don't quite grasp the philosophy that the more that we focusing on we get into insurance industry, or whatever domain we're looking at, and go and dominate, and as opposed to us thinking it's a for lack of a better term, if I gain, you lose, and if I lose, you gain. We're able to grow the pie collectively greater than it would have been with just a few of us. How do you see us overcoming that so we can begin to help people understand that if we can get into and grow an industry larger, that we all can gain from it as opposed to us trying to close the door behind us?
Yeah. No, I think that's key. One of the ways that I see that happening is through conversations like these, honest conversations, brothers that can come to the table with a level of professional experience where we can have honest dialogue. I think that's the impetus. But I think also too, it's really going to take as much of an effort as it is to miseducate us. I think it's going to be an even greater effort to re-educate us, meaning that we think in terms of, we operate in a capitalistic society, but we think in terms of exactly what you said. If I get, you don't have. And I always say, if you're the only person in the room, you're in the wrong room. Because
Right.
I don't want to be in here. I saw that movie Get Out, and I don't want to be
Yeah.
anywhere. They start stirring that tea. I'm
Oh
not.
yeah.
Man,
so, so, but in all seriousness, I think that really it comes down to a mind shift and a remembering of our culture. If you think about what makes our culture unique, I don't care if you're in California or Florida. There's a gathering, there are certain similarities going to happen. There's certain songs that are going to be played. There's certain dances, certain
right.
traditions that they may look different. What's on the plate may taste and look a little different, but it's the same. So I think, kind of philosophically, it's a remembering of what is our culture. We are more of a collective, culture,
We
and
are.
that's what we do. And getting back to that, and then operating that within the system. And I think the other thing is that just that education of, okay, it is starting with grassroots financial literacy and getting out different words about profession, because I work with professional athletes and I can tell you this: we never talk sports, we're talking business. And I think that message needs to resonate, because when you turn on the TV, you're seeing LeBron, you're seeing, you're seeing what he does on the court, but you're not seeing all of the investments that he's making off the court. And I
Yeah, the
think that's a great disservice.
yeah the strong business leaders, black men that are business leaders, aren't the ones who are portrayed. We're not in the press. We're not in the media out front. But sports athletes are, entertainers are. So a lot of kids are striving to be what they see as opposed to what they more likely can become. You can become a businessman a lot easier than you become LeBron James. Trust me on that. But our kids, too many of them are focused on trying to be the next LeBron, or sports superstar or entertainer like Jamie Foxx or someone, as opposed to a Reginald Lewis or some business person, which you have a much better chance of going to school and becoming Reginald Lewis before you become LeBron James. So, and really, we need to focus our kids more on what our proper goals and aspirations are and things that you really should be fighting for in life. Not to say that you give up on a sports dream, but some of you who are, if you 5'7" and can't dunk, yeah, give that dream up. Go ahead and focus on business school, getting that MBA or that PhD, and doing something with your life. So,
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely.
and then the last comment you mentioned, I think Charlemagne, the God. Um, Tom and I joke back and forth that we are better than the Breakfast Club. We don't we don't get their numbers because we can't get the celebrities, but we get quality people like you to come on and have meaningful conversations. Because last week we had a financial planner or the brother came on, that talked about how to raise money, how other groups of people pool their money and get multiple loans of that money over and over and over to fund their businesses. And here we are, every
Mhm.
black person is trying to start a business by themselves and struggling to raise the money.
That is one thing that I think moving forward, that is something that I'm going to be a part of the solution. I went at it, and I'm the first to tell you, I went at it by myself. Hey, I'm the lone wolf, and then I
You,
got there by myself. I
a
said,
lot of other black business people
"This
did
is
the
the
same thing.
dumbest thing.
Yes,
This is the dumbest thing. Wait a minute, you do this, I do. You're great at this. Even a team is a team. What am I doing?" So that's something that I am. I'm laser like focused on doing is looking at that team aspect. So
and,
I,
and
I'll
I'll,
And
hold
whether,
myself accountable.
and this is not
and,
to
and
and this is not to embarrass the frat, but this is one of my frustrations that on a few grad chapter meetings I did attend to say, hey, we have lawyers, doctors, accountants, we have every profession represented in the frat. Why aren't we pooling those resources to come together to do more than raise money for the Black and Gold pageant scholarship, which is important. Don't get me wrong, but with all the talent we have in this organization, we should all be free tomorrow. But somehow we can't get past raising money and giving out scholarships. That's not to embarrass you, Tom, 'cause I know you're quite
oh no,
active.
no, well, no, it's not embarrassing. And there are, and mind you, there are some chapters who are out there doing it. There are chapters who are investing in real estate and doing that kind of thing. But definitely too few and too far in between. But the awareness has to come from someplace, and that's why we need people like yourself, Jimmy, to get back into the fold
Trying to reel
and
me
start
in,
sharing
man.
Hey,
start,
come on back.
start sharing the knowledge, man, so that we
Man,
can continue
okay.
to mature
I
and we
will
can
I will
continue to
definitely
mature.
consider it, Tom, but y'all will kick me out of there, man. Uh,
Hey,
that
listen,
they don't ask me to come
I
back
might
to
be
those meetings for a
the youngest
reason.
brother here. I'll exercise deference on this conversation, brothers. But I will say this: there is a level of leadership that our fraternity in particular possesses. That when you have a number of leaders, one of the things the hardest to do is follow. So there may
Yeah,
be, and
that's true.
there may be some of that going on. But I think that you're talking, and Jimmy, if I may,
Hmm.
infrastructure. We have infrastructure as a frat, as a community, but overall
Right.
infrastructure. There are different chapters at different levels, and Roland Martin makes this point all the time. Different chapters at different levels. International infrastructure. I mean, people at different levels where we said, hey, let's mobilize. You can drop 3, 4, 5, 600,000 college educated professionals in any city. That's something that we absolutely are not harnessing.
That's true.
Absolutely. So I will echo that point, completely. That I think we're underutilizing our power, but we got to use our power in any industry that we're in because we have it, and we can't be afraid to wield it once we're in those spaces.
Okay.
And I think more importantly, and Jim, we do talk about this pretty regularly. We as Black men, understanding that we've got families, we've got responsibilities, and all this other kind of stuff, but we are allowing the women
Right.
to outpace us
Yes. Take
in
the
a lot of
lead.
these areas. Exactly, and we have got to figure out a way to say, hey, it's time to step up and tell the wives and the girlfriends and all these other kind of stuff to look, baby, this is for the greater good. This is for after we're gone. And if many of us do just a little bit, we can accomplish a lot more than, to your point, Brother Weber, one of us. some dude
Right.
by trying to get everything done. And I think that's part of that leverage, that's part of the infrastructure that we've got to figure out. Because again, as Black men in particular, it is a struggle, and we are allowing the women to outpace us in terms of entrepreneurship, leadership, being able to grow our capital, and quite frankly, run our families. And that's something that has to be fixed.
Well, Tom, that was one of the
Absolutely.
complaints I had when I was attending a few meetings. Because I would hear about these deltas doing all these great things, and I was like, "Hey, brothers, what? We need to be able to match what they're doing. In fact, we should be
Mm-hmm.
leading. We should be doing. We should be outpacing them." But they were doing like job training. Man, they had some centers for battered women. I mean, they were doing some stuff. I was like, that's the kind of stuff we should be doing
Yeah.
rather than just writing checks and raising money. But that's
Well,
another
well,
story.
what a lot of brothers said is the reason they have to do that because we're having to fund all that stuff. we're having to make a decision who's going to get stuff. It ends up being her stuff is getting paid for. And we got to be
So 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 we pay the bills and
yeah,
they do the good
yeah.
deeds with their money.
Exactly. We're paying for the house. We're paying for their conventions, their dues, and everything else.
Okay, with the few minutes we
Yeah,
have
look, look.
left, I just have
Waiting
one
on to
thing
see if
I
my
want
wife
to.
come in.
Oh, okay. With the few minutes we have left, I just have one thing to say. People, Brandon's information is in the description. His website, his email address, his phone number. Please give him a call. Please, please, please. It's very important. You need someone that you can trust today. You need to make sure that you have the proper coverage. And for someone you can trust, is going to tell you be a straight shooter. He's not just try to lie to you just to make a dollar. So you can trust that he's going to look out for your best interest. Make sure you have proper coverage. If you need to take on a little bit more risk to reduce costs or something, he can find that right balance for you. But you need someone in this industry you can trust. I mean, that's why I buy my insurance from Brandon because I sleep better at night knowing if anything happens, I pick the phone up, I give him a call, he calls me, we talk, and he can tell me the ins and outs, and he's a straight shooter. So please reach out to the brother. I'm not saying you have to buy insurance from him. I'm just saying give him a chance to review what you have to make sure you're properly covered. Because when your house go down or your car is totaled, that's not the time to find out that you're undercovered. To say,
True.
hey, I don't have enough insurance to cover my risk or my needs or my property. So call them before something happens. Let them review what you have. It's not going to cost you anything to ask for a review, and then and get some advice. To look over what you have, and he can tell you, hey, this is a good policy. You got a good deal. Stick with it, or maybe here's some areas where you can supplement it and make it better. Or it's a bad policy, get rid of it, and come talk to me. Let me show you what I can do for you.
And so we can also be very clear where in what states can you provide insurance to people in so we make sure that we have the right people
Right. That's a
covered.
good question.
Yeah, not all of them.
All
In all
50 states.
seriousness, all
Okay.
50,
Oh,
Hawaii and
okay,
Alaska.
beautiful.
So
So
this
yeah,
is this is
so
nationwide, bro. That's what I'm talking about.
nationwide, and that's pretty rare for our industry to have access to all of them. But I'm well versed. I field calls from Mississippi. I'm on Central Time, so if you call me late
Wow.
California time,
Okay.
then you might not get me. But in all seriousness, I think all the states, definitely in the Sun Belt states, really from California to Florida, everywhere in between, South and up north. So
And so people will also know you work as an independent. You don't you do or don't work. You work as an independent, or do you work with one of the bigs? Or
I work as an independent means I have access to the big companies. I like to say it like this: I don't have one company on my logo because it's my company. I work for you. So
and so
yeah,
you're like a broker if that's the case.
broker. That's correct.
Got
We find the best policy for you.
Okay, just very brief. I know we're out of time here, Jimmy.
Sure.
Help us understand the difference between being an insurance broker and the typical insurance agent and why that is valuable, of course, to the folks who are listening.
Sure. So think about it this way: either you work for the Cowboys or you work for the NFL. So if you work for the Cowboys, that is your team. That is all. You are blue and silver and blue, and that is who you go and buy. So they have a bad season, you're going down with the team. They have a great season, you're going to look like a hero. Whereas you work for the NFL, if Jacksonville is winning the Super Bowl, good. If if it's the Bengals, and these are things that will never happen. That's why I'm saying them. But
Gotcha.
if it's Jacksonville, the Bengals, then that's who you represent. So when me being an independent, I'm more like the NFL. I can work with different teams in order to
Gotcha.
make sure that you get the best fit, as opposed to being tied to one particular team.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Well, we are out of time now for certain.
Thank you,
Tom, go
gentlemen.
ahead and close us out with a prayer, man.
All right, good deal. I'll make it very brief. Dear Lord and gracious Master, we come before you again, thanking you for breathing into us life again. We thank you for bringing us together again as men so that we can convey knowledge to those who are out there who need to hear a word today. Father, we just thank you. We thank you for wrapping your hands around us. We thank you for ordering our steps in the way that you see it fit. Father, we ask you would continue to keep our minds focused on you and that you would continue to bless through us those things that your people need to see and hear. And in your precious name we pray. Amen.
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 Amen. Thank you, gentlemen.